darkness, they're actually the darkest of all. That's just a truism. They're actually the darkest people on the planet. Oh, I don't have any darkness, really? You're like an abandoned coal mining shaft 1,000 feet down. You have to, Um, so it's about mastering your own darkness. The mastery of darkness is part of the spiritual journey of man. Okay, this is not taught in the traditional Abrahamic religions. The duality between God and the devil is a lie. They are both divine agents, and they both work for the creation. And you
Mm-hmm.
have to pass the tests of both.
Mm-hmm.
And believe me when I tell you, you would not want to live in a world that did not have the governance and the jurisdiction of Satan and the demons, because the evil that human beings would be capable of without that restraint would be mind-boggling.
Mm.
So, because we're actually the most dangerous thing in creation, human beings. We're far more dangerous than the demons and all of those sorts of things. So the light of darkness, there's the general metaphysical or spiritual premise of the book. And then basically the book, after we get done with Bob's introduction in the first part of the book and his life story and his near-death experiences in youth and everything, then we get into the main body of the book, which is about two-thirds of the prose in the book. And that picks up around the formation of the Bank of England.
Mm-hmm.
And it uses John Milton's Paradise Lost as a kind of literary outline to write the book. And I make the case that the world is controlled by three principal demons, Moloch and Belial. And you can, in this sense, you can look upon the demons as simply not as literal phenomenological beings, but more like states of consciousness we can individually and collectively get into.
Mm-hmm.
So Moloch is the demon we sacrifice our children to, and that's a very literal demon, by the way. That that entity truly exists, and that's an exchange that's still very much in play now. I think it's coming to an end now. Moloch is a real entity, and people are still sacrificing children to Moloch. Then you've got Belial, which is the demon of pleasure and distraction, and that's everywhere right now. And then you've got Mammon. Mammon is the great builder and the demon of materialism. We usually associate him with money, but it's if you go back to the original depiction of the demon in Milton's Paradise Lost, it's more just about materialism and things like this. It's very interesting text that John Milton wrote, you know. I think it was divinely. I see God in all religions. I see God more in people than I do in any one religion. So I may see God in like a Shinto master from 2,200 years ago. I may see God in an Islamic mystic in the 12th century. And in this instance, even though Milton was Catholic, very much see the hand of God in Paradise Lost, and especially the time it was written. You know, and I don't know if you know the story of that manuscript, but his dog actually dragged it into the fire, and he went blind. So he reproduced the whole manuscript by literally orating it to one of his daughters, and the daughter wrote it all down. When you sit down and you read the poem, and you understand how mind-boggling that is that he was even able to do it. That would be an incredible feat for a genius in the 21st century to do, let alone in 1666. It's mind-boggling. So Mammon, Belial, and Moloch are the three demons that are really at the center of everything in the world right now. And we do live in a very, very satanic world.
Mm-hmm.
Formal form and formal Satanism began in it's always been here, but as an attempt to, let's say, run the world,
Mm-hmm.
um, it really began in England, I'd say in the late 1600s. And it's still very much in control now. It's what we're trying to finally do away with now. So in the telling of this story, I mean, there's just all kinds of really incredibly um, dark stuff about the world in the light of darkness. I mean, this is a book. This is what mastering darkness is about. It's about being able to address these things and hold them in your consciousness without becoming mentally imbalanced or physically ill, because it's extremely disturbing stuff, all of it. And most people just want to pretend it doesn't exist. Okay? We talk a little bit about the extraterrestrials in the book, and let's call them interdimensionals.
Hmm.
So the Earth is run through a combination of um, beings in the inner Earth and extraterrestrials. And there was and still is to some degree, but less now. There was a lot of commerce on this planet. A lot of human beings were being taken off the planet and sold as slaves or genetic material or things like this. Um, so when I say extraterrestrial, a lot of people will immediately conjure the idea of a disc, of a little alien or a tall gray, and all of those ideas have been put in your head by the last people on the planet you should be listening to, the
Okay.
government in Hollywood. So most extraterrestrial activity takes place on the fourth dimension, or what we call the astral plane.
Hmm.
So it's not even physical in the sense that we're physical. However, the astral plane, the fourth dimension, is a very real place. And what happens to you there will affect you here on this planet. Okay? So if you get punched in the gut in the astral, you will feel it on the physical. You will have physical pain. Very often, things that happen to you on the astral when you're in a physical body are more painful in the physical than the astral. So this
Do you
is
think
why when
even
you read
death?
books, well, when you die, you first end up on the lower astral, yeah.
But
So
do you think from
in
a intense enough astral attack, it could lead to death in the physical?
oh, that's the question. 100%. Yeah. People are taken out all the time from the astral. I mean, they have operatives in um excuse me. They have
Bless you.
operatives in the CIA, in MI6, and Mossad who can do that. I mean, that's
Yep.
so prolific now. I think some of the even some of the more advanced organized international organized crime agencies have contractors who can kill remotely. Remote killing. I'll see all of this stuff really got came about after World War II. World War II and the technology that the Nazis and the Allies got into to fight that war, and specifically the technology of the human psyche, was the Pandora's box that has defined the world since World War II.
I
And
would
that,
agree.
yeah. So when you look at World War II, there's a pre-World War II world, and then there's an after World War II world.
Yep.
Okay, and if you look at it, it's not front and center, but really the major narrative for the last since Theodore Herzl has been Israel and the Third Temple of Solomon.
Yeah.
And that's what's going on now,
Yep.
right? Now, what people need to understand is this is not a Jewish goal. And this is being made abundantly clear by the Torah Jews all over the world now, the diaspora Jews, who have become some of the most vocal protesters of what Netanyahu's government is doing. So the Third Temple of Solomon is the crowning achievement of the satanic set that's running the world now. And the reason is, if you go back to the original lore, Solomon was probably the world's biggest whoremonger. Solomon had like 1,000
Thousands.
concubines.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's like three a day, 365 days a year, right? Like who
It's
even
what.
has the energy for that,
It's
right?
alpha.
So yeah, so Solomon was the ultimate whoremonger, and a lot of his women came from other tribes. And as women are wont to do, they were able to convince him to do certain things and to get certain favors out of him. And one of his concubines from one of the, I think it was one of the Assyrian tribe. Was it the Assyrian tribe? I don't want to get this wrong because Patrick Bet David is Assyrian, and I don't want to piss him off. But um, I think she was a Canaanite or a Babylonian, like one of those non-Jewish tribes. and they were worshiping Moloch. And she convinced Solomon to build a temple to Moloch right beside the Jewish temple. Okay? And so they were side by side, like literally like side by side.
Hmm.
And so there was and then Solomon eventually repented and God gave him another chance and he gave up all of that nonsense. And
Hmm.
but that really begins sort of what we'll call the dark side of Judaica. It begins with Solomon, okay? So you have this left hand Judaica and right hand Judaica. And the right hand is the Torah Jew, who is God-fearing, uh, observant of all of the duties and obligations of uh, an adherent of the Jewish faith. And in very many instances, those people achieve some form of grace, some form of communion with God.
Hmm.
And on the other side, you have this left hand, which never went away. So when you look at Jewish scripture, it always sounds like they're describing the past. Oh, back in these days, but no, it's agnostic to time, which means that everything they're talking about going on 3,000 years ago is going on today. So if they're talking about Moloch, Moloch is alive today. Okay? When something leaves the scripture completely and they no longer discuss it as an event in the timeline, past, present, or future, it means they're done with it in the Jewish faith. Time, when you read the Talmud, when you read these scriptures, take time out. Just assume everything they say is going on, even if they say, okay, this is what we did 3,000 years ago. Take the time out and realize they're doing it right now. Okay? So all of these things are still going on. And this left-handed Judaica became the basis of all of the control religion for the Western world. And they literally took over everything. And you can see all of this like sneak right up, into something like the interview with Ronald Bernard, the Dutch banker, where he describes,
Yep.
going up in the ranks of this international banking world and finally being invited to a child sacrifice ritual and having a nervous breakdown and leaving his body.
Yeah.
And what did he say? What did he say at the end of that interview? And he just whispers it because everybody is so afraid of sounding anti-Semitic. Well,
Yeah.
they're following the protocols of Zion.
Yeah.
Okay? But here's how you talk about it without being anti-Semitic. It's not the Jews. It's something else. Does it have its roots in the same garden that Torah Judaism does? Yes, it does. Just like there are forms of Satanism that evolved out of the Vatican. Okay, renegade bishops, renegade
Yep. That's
priests.
true.
Um, do you know? Did you ever take a deep dive into that story that came out of Pennsylvania around 2014, and that there were over 1,000 parish priests all through the state of Pennsylvania involved in child abuse and making kiddie pornography, including um, um, some things I don't even feel comfortable saying aloud.
Yep.
That kind of pornography that harms people with children. 1,000 Catholic priests. Ask yourself, how could you go through the rigors of it takes 7 to 9 years to get through Catholic seminary. So you go through all of those rigors, you take the vows, and then you become a Satanist. So when you
Yeah.
think about it, you can go, well, that might be possible. Yeah, I can see where that highly unlikely, but wow, this is a really strange world. Anything can happen. But like 1,000 of them over a dozen different parishes or hundreds of parishes all through the state of Pennsylvania. A parish is the jurisdiction of a single church in the Catholic
Yep.
system. I was raised Catholic. So how does that, is it anti-Catholic to say that? I don't think so. Just like it isn't anti-Jewish to say or anti-Semitic to say that certain schools of Satanism have their roots in the same garden that gave us Judaica.
Yeah.
And this is the left and the right hand I was talking about,
Yeah.
right?
I
And how
totally.
you have to. Yeah. Sorry, I'm talking too much. Go
Oh
ahead.
no, no, no! It's great. It's fantastic, and I don't mean to cut you off, but to just tee up and I guess elaborate on what you've stated so far, right? So, in Light of Darkness, right, you've laid out the metaphysical world that we have extraterrestrials that are more accurately defined as extra dimensionals in the astral plane, right? We see them having nefarious forces, and then we find on the planet today that multiple, let's say, supremacist gangs, right? So we could put the Catholic Church in that. We could put Zionism in that, right? We could even put the Chinese.
Protestantism through
Sure.
Protestantism through Freemasonry,
Freemasonry, yes,
right?
which
So
is
in
Kabbalic,
one of the things,
actually.
the light of darkness, yeah, it's pure. The light of darkness explains all of this. You hear all this crazy stuff about the Freemasons. Oh, they go back to the time of Egypt. Well, I mean, mythologically, but in terms of real timeline, when lodges got built and everything, it happens the same time as the Bank of England.
Hmm.
So clearly, you don't have to be a homicide detective to look at the period of time and go, well, it was probably these Sabbatean Jews from Amsterdam that introduced it once they got the bank charter for the Bank of England because they needed Gentiles to work with. So they introduced them to their magic and customs. But the average person would be absolutely astounded the degree to which magic works in this world.
Yes, black
It's
magic.
it's it's in everything. And they speak in a symbolic language, it's in our banknotes in Canada and the United States. I mean, you could deconstruct a US $20 bill. There's some really good videos on YouTube from occultists who do it. I mean, you would be amazed what is on that
Yeah.
$20 bill. Like it's mind-boggling.
Hmm.
Where did it all come from? Right?
Yeah. The pyramid is Talmudic, and people don't understand that. The all-seeing eye pyramid is Talmudic. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Um.
yeah,
Cool.
so they love the building, right? The Freemasons. And the building refers to a kind of magic, and it's the same magic that built the pyramids and built the Temple of Solomon.
Mm.
Now, Solomon says through the Lesser Keys of Solomon that he was able to command the demons to build the temple, to physically be his construction work. I don't think if you were to get into a time machine, that's what really happened. But it's
Cool.
definitely something to think about for anybody who wants to understand what's going on in the world today.
Yeah. Question for you. So we talk about
Hmm.
the three different demons, head demons of this planet, right? You referred to the builders, Moloch, the god of sacrifice, and the god of pleasure. Do you see, like, for example, the Masons are master builders,
Belial.
right? So do you see them as the embodiment of that specific
Yeah.
demon and that there's warring factions, or?
No, no, no.
Okay.
They're all working together. There's a grand plan behind the scenes.
Okay.
When internal factional fighting will begin in that world when they have secured power overtly. Okay. And then while they're all working to usurp the power that governs the world, they're unified.
Yeah.
Once they have it and they overtly rate it and declare it, and this is in our timeline, we're going to have to go through this, and this would which are really a plan. When you it's really more of a plan than it is a prophecy. But um, when they have overt power, they'll probably start their infighting,
Hmm.
and, and because it's in their nature. But there's another thing to consider as well. Okay, so when God expresses itself, because beyond gender, we usually attribute the masculine to God, um, but and the rays of the sun penetrating the earth, right? So it's very much a sort of a phallic thing. But God is sort of like beyond gender. There's there's really no gender to God. So God is really, I think, a lot more agnostic to what happens down here than you might imagine. Because the way God views it in the evolutionary cycle of which is billions of years for a soul, you got to go through all this stuff. So the good, the bad, everything go through. And then at the end of it all, you will be a perfected being. Um, so the Satanists, they're going to start their overt fighting once they have, and that seems to me very close to us in the timeline now. Very, very close to us. You said at the beginning of the interview, meanings in light of darkness now seem prophetic. What were you referring to specifically?
Oh, yeah. It seems as though, you know, almost like they've a cave full of demons have been unleashed on the world in the last few years. We see it during COVID. Just even the
Yeah,
if you look at even the world leaders during COVID, man, they look possessed. And we see this just shameless flooding of insanity and
yeah,
debauchery, and at a level that you would never ever think would happen. Like just what they're doing with kids in the mainstream versus, or the government policies, or just the
yeah,
absolute clown world insanity everywhere you look. It feels like the gates of hell have been opened up. Yeah, that.
yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And so this is what they're doing now. They're making their push for overt and some of the things that we have to witness now are extremely disturbing. Um, Drag queen story time is extremely disturbing, extremely disturbing. And look, for the listeners, I'm not approaching this as a Christian, okay? Jesus saves. I mean, no, no disrespect to Jesus, who's one of the greatest avatars to come to the planet. Um, but so don't take what I'm saying in a religion. Try to understand it spiritually. Okay, what's being done to these children through drag times story hour? They're being conditioned to live in a world where ultimately they will pleasure. They want to train the children to pleasure adults. So basically, all the stuff you've heard about how society operates behind the closed doors of the MK Ultra world and the families that give their children to this world, they want that to be the normal world. They don't want the world. And they feel they've earned it because their culture, their subculture has come to dominate the world. But it's only and also through there's not enough people generating or representing what we would call the God energy on the planet. There's just not enough people. I mean, you the people most representative of this culture have sort of abandoned it. And here I'm thinking of like renunciate yogis in the Himalaya mountains and stuff like that. It would be nice if skin race and said, look, you know, higher consciousness is real. And being a good human being is very established morality as we grapple with these dark forces, which are definitely trying to take over control of our societies now, especially in the West. And if they get the West, they get the whole world. China is not going to change anything. China is a very dark place too. I don't even want to know what goes on behind the curtain in China. Yeah, over there, it's just pure naked power. I
Yeah.
lived in Taiwan for a couple years. I speak Mandarin. I feel I have a right to comment. So and Xi Jinping is just the worst guy we've seen since Deng Xiaoping,
Hmm.
which was the leader after Mao Zedong. And one of the first things they did after Mao Zedong, because they all agreed even Mao went too far. And so after Mao died, one of the reasons that Deng Xiaoping was able to take control of the Communist Party was he introduced term limits, 2 terms, no more for a premier,
Hmm.
because Mao had done the dictating rule for decades. And Xi Jinping has undone that now. He's leader for life, man.
Yeah.
All right. And generally, when you see somebody do that, it's never a good thing. There's some people in the United States who would probably be happy if Donald Trump became leader for life, but that would not be a good thing either. Power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So they would just go completely off the rails as well. So,
I agree. Yeah, so my larger question is just trying to fully get the idea of the metaphysical picture. So, I think in terms of, let's say, galactic or universal, right? So we have these bad actors in the astral plane. They seem to have multiple manifestations and agents on Earth in high states of power. Do you think that these controllers and these powers, do you think this
yes.
is unique to Earth specifically? Like, what exactly are we dealing with here?
No, no. I much bigger than one planet. Um, so, um, so after I finished The Light of Darkness, about 3 days after I was done, I sat down to do a meditation session cross-legged. And I was about, 5 or 7 minutes into the breathing and the relaxation. And this being popped into my forehead, into my third eye. And he was about 9 feet tall, clearly not human, freaked me out.
Okay.
I popped right up and stood up and I went, wow, I should have written that book with Bob. Now I'm really haunted. And so I called a friend of mine and he's a Ligurian. And I said, a Ligurian? He said, yeah. And it's a race of people that live in this Milky Way galaxy, but far, far away.
Mm-hmm.
And, and you see, on the other side, in the world of what we call spirit, and there's various levels of density in the world of spirit. So the densest is what we call the astral. This is where most of us, right, is on the astral. And after that, you go up to this other plane called the causal. And when you get up there, where the energy is a little bit finer, last periods of time, like thousands and millions of years into the past, and
Mm-hmm.
then far into the future as well. So this is the dimension that Nostradamus probably had access to
Mm-hmm.
in his trance states. Okay, so and then it just keeps going from there. But this Ligurian came right in on the astral, and I had never had one there before, and I've been meditating for 40 years. I've met dead masters, like I if he go when I'm 22 years old, he may pop into a meditation 15 years later, even after I've forgotten him, and introduce himself. And this is quite common in spiritual practice to be able to commiserate with people who were in the physical body but have left the physical body, not reincarnated. And a lot of times they'll hang around close to the earth and continue to help people, and especially people who are studying these things. But I had never met an extraterrestrial before, and this really, really freaked me out. I had to talk to two or three people, but the story I got back was that the intensity of the book had opened up a portal, and he had come through the portal, and he wanted to talk to me because they were having the same problems with negativity on their planet. And I ended up closing the portal. I don't want to really be talking to extraterrestrials or anything like that. I don't know. People to do that. I really don't want to do that. You may want to do it. You gotta do it.
Well, I think about that too. So I started getting into uh, what's his name? The other Tom. I forget his name, but anyways, astral projection and training in that regard. And I do feel there's like this strong blockage within myself to do it. And then I hear a lot of Christians say, buddy, you don't want to go there. And other people, non Christian, even say that it can really open you up to, you know, bad influences. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on astral projection? Is that something you've ever done or practiced?
Yeah, the very first time I learned a meditation technique and sat down to do it at 17 years old, I I popped out of my body onto the astral.
Wow.
Yes, you can get into trouble. Um, absolutely. But look.
this is a question that is impossible to avoid. So I'm going to hit it head on. That you can get into trouble. You have to go through this region. Okay? You have to go through it. This idea that you're going to live like an innocent child and Jesus and God are going to take care of you. This is the worst religious or spiritual idea given to the human race, okay? You have to get out there and you have to fight your battles. Oh, Bruce, you could get, the blah, 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 demons. Let me tell you, human beings are not delicate flowers. We can hold our own with anything. Okay? It's not necessarily that that is even going to happen to you. And generally, if something like that happens to you, that you go into an altered state of mind, and you get breached, let's say, by a demonic entity, a low-level demonic entity, well, there's a reason that happened. There's something in your vibration or frequency. There's a reason that that happened. And you need to figure out what that reason is, because it's going to keep happening until you fix what that is, whether you're Christian or not.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So there's I would, coming from a Christian family, like being raised a Catholic, I grapple with what to say when I'm asked about these questions.
Yeah.
But I mean, in the end, these religions have degenerated into mind control now. This is not to say that the Christ is not out there. The Christ is out there. You, you can communicate spiritually with the Christ, but it's not going to happen through any of these churches. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to he like at this point he's choosing the people he communicates with, not the other way around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, I struggle with it too. Sorry, Bruce, do you mind just going off camera? So we're still getting a lot of lag, and
Boy, that's quite a lag.
yeah, I think it's the screen. So I'm gonna I took our cameras off for the screen. I'm just have the backdrop, and I'll drop camera, and maybe if you try that, maybe we'll have a cleaner audio.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, guys.
How's that?
Super technical difficulties. Yeah, it sounds better. Let's give it a whirl. Yeah, you know, I don't mean to be one to play up events, but I had a I've had weird things happening just in the past
Okay.
week. The day after I reached out to you, my phone totally died unexplicably. It was in perfect health and it died, and I took it to a cell phone repair shop, and they've been working on it for a week and a half. And so I don't know if this is something common to you. And also,
Yeah.
I've heard in the past in your work, a lot of people have um, been through quite a bit.
It is. Yeah. I mean, they can't really stop me from talking, but they can make it as uncomfortable as possible. And what they can do is try to frustrate you. But remember, um so let's go back to the astral travel question. Is it dangerous? Well, it's no more dangerous than this interview. Okay? So you can see what they call powers and principalities battling right in this interview. You know, if they were in control of everything, we wouldn't even be able to have this interview. They would, and that control will be overt. There will be no mystery about it. There will be no fourth dimension. It'll all be brought down to the third dimension. And we're getting very, very close now with a leader like Justin Trudeau in Canada. I mean, he's already brought in all kinds of draconian censorship measures, and that's how they'll do that. But we live in a spiritual reality. We live in a warring universe. Okay, there's a negative and a positive pole. It's a warring universe, and yes, anybody who, especially an interview like this, not so much Stardust Ranch. Like I did 2 hours on Stardust Ranch on Clyde Lewis's Ground Zero about 2.5 months ago, and the interview went off without a hitch. But this book in particular, The Light of Darkness, which we have spent most of the interview talking about, is the one where you get all the problems.
Yeah, and I've noticed that in my own work. So, where I've unpacked that concept. So,
So there's still a massive lag, eh?
oh yeah, yeah. So what I've noticed is, so what I'm trying to develop what I call the post-truther movement, where there's a group of us and we all know what's going on, the general themes, let's say, right? But what do we do with that? How do we live beautiful, spiritual, positive lives of, creativeness and all of that? And so, I noticed that the truther community, I've come to the conclusion, is a big part of the looshing or the
Well,
overall trap, in that as long as you spew negativity and scare people all day, man, you can get access to YouTube and Twitter and the algorithms. They love that. But as soon as you start saying messages of empowerment and true empowerment, that's when I think you get into
yeah,
trouble. What's your thoughts on that, Bruce?
yeah. Oh, I totally agree. I mean, look, I believe that a correctly lived life is centered on God. Now, however you want to do that, if you want to do that as a Buddhist and meditate 2 hours a day, great. If you want to do it as a Christian and live all of the behavioral virtues of the Gospels, great. If you want to do it as a Sikh, great. But we need to lead lives that are centered on a pursuit of the divine, of God, of love, of goodness. And we need to be good, okay? We need to be good. It's not just enough to talk about it, okay? Um, Even though you might be able to become an overnight millionaire in crypto, should you be doing that? Or should you be, is the Bible right when it says, you should work honestly for a living? I believe the saying is, he who does not work should not eat or shall not eat or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
There's something about honest work. And I mean, just look at Gen Z now. If you look at the YouTube presence of Gen Z, the entire generation is about how not to work. Whether you're going to be an attractive female who basically becomes a digital whore, or an alpha male in Gen Z has figured out the intricate nuances of crypto or mineral trading or forex or something like this. Nobody's building houses. Nobody is working. You know what I mean? And first of all, we have to be good. This is the key thing. And if you're good, so let's ask all the question. Let's answer all the questions you've asked again. Is it dangerous to go into the astral? No, not if you're good. If you're good and your intention is good and you go into the astral, you will meet beings of light and love. If you're going in there to get power, you're going to meet the demons, because guess what? They're the ones that control power, just like we're told the universe has been set up in all the holy books, whether it be the Bible or the Bhagavad Gita or the Tao Te Ching. It's all the same thing. Okay? So it's all about your intention, and you can't fool. On the other side, you're completely transparent. Don't don't think you're good if you're not good. You'll get eaten alive. Okay? You got to really, truly be good and make sacrifices in life. Are we still
Yeah.
lagging?
I think we're okay. I took off the cameras on the screen due to Illuminati attacks. I told everybody in the chat there. But yeah, and so yeah, this is something I really struggle with in my own spiritual journey, because I found so many deep truths in Eastern religion, and the concept of the ego is one of the most freeing things I've ever started to grasp, right? And creating that separation between the ego or the false self, which I think you can make a case for is the biblical Satan in a way. Um, and then, but also, especially now when you just see so much rampant evil in the world,
Yes.
right? And you see a lot of New Agers kind of toss that away, like, oh, it's all subjective, everything's an illusion, like, everything's
Yeah.
fine. And maybe on a higher level with God, I do see the argument that we need evil for us to grow and evolve, but it doesn't give me a lot of solace at night, right? And I believe deeply in my being that we need to also call out evil and, speak truth to it. And maybe constantly resisting and getting angry at it, just, complaining online isn't the answer. I think it's living a life of goodness. But, within me, and maybe it is because I was raised Christian, but it's just this, I keep coming back to this idea of being so connected to the Christian ethos of calling out evil, and seeing the world through that lens of clearly evil demonic forces in the world.
Yeah. Um, the next book is really about the balance between the negative and the positive, and what the role of the negative is. And yeah, no, they're not going to like it at all.
Yeah, well, in my research, so I did an episode called "Consent Positive Tyranny," and I've came to this conclusion that much of the actual control structures that we see, it's no longer, the secret police in, communist Russia. There's very few actual boots on the ground, and that their war, their battle is very much psychological and of the mind. And that's why I call it the spell breakers. That's what I consider a spell. But I'm curious your thoughts on that, because I argued with a Christian, great guy, by the way, on Sunday, just about this idea of almost everything that we see in the world is by our consent. And I haven't fully unpacked that, but I just see it's true. Like, not only the phenomenon of revelation of the method, where they constantly tell us what they're going to do to us, but also their scripts are always so easy to debunk that, I think you have to be under a form of mind control to accept it. So I'd be very curious to get your insights on that concept, specifically the concept around to what extent is the evil that we see in the world of our consent.
Yes, very simply, yes. It wouldn't be here if we didn't consent to it.
Can you walk us through that? Because I've also heard you state that money is a karmic transference system, and you mentioned it in passing in one of your interviews. And is that one of the mechanisms that you see in terms of us allowing evil, or maybe just broadly, you can give us some examples, or kind of flesh out this idea of why the evil we see in the world is of our consent?
Okay, so the money is a very interesting topic. So right away, the money pivots off of a secondary person they create that has a title called your legal person. This is literally a non-tangible, a non-manifest voodoo doll. Okay, and this is where the karmic transference happens. And so when you take an order and you fulfill an order, you assume the responsibility and the karmic liability for the action. The person who said to you, I want you to go and do this, this, and this, their hands are clean, which is, how, by the way, how the system continues. Because if they had to do it themselves and they didn't have the leverage of the money system and they couldn't buy their dirty deeds, as the AC/DC song says, they'd be in a lot of trouble, and they would not have been able to sustain this evil for several generations.
Mm.
So what happens when they try? So every action has a reaction, and the reaction comes to the being or the entity that is the inception point of the action itself. So the way the system operates, and this is what none of these patriot movements, sovereign citizens, and free men on the land really can, they don't understand the underlying spiritual principles of the structure. They understand that it runs contrary to the Bible, and that's really what they're reacting to.
Yep.
Hey, we're forfeiting our freedom, but they don't understand the underlying magic of it, okay? And it's this magic itself that they're going to use to catapult us into the new world with the World Economic Forum. They're going to use the money magic, and they're going to do it by collapsing the money system.
Hmm.
And that I think will probably happen in 2024. And then when that happens, wow. And again, I'm not trying to create fear or create a loose show where people lose energy through worry or anything like that. But when that happens, if you don't have your own food supply and your own water supply, it's going to be a very difficult time. Um, what might happen is the government might step in and set up rationing centers in high school gyms,
Yep.
like they did in Britain in World War II. Come get your box of food. You get 100 grams of margarine and quarter quarter kilogram of sugar and a bag of flour, and you've got to live on that for a week or 2 weeks.
Yep.
Um, which, if I were to have said that out loud 4 or 5 years ago, it would have said crazy. It would have sounded crazy. Not so much since we've gone through COVID, does
Yep.
it?
Nope. Not at all.
Oh, the lag is completely gone. We're in real time again.
Yeah, it does seem like that. Just on the topic of COVID, so I'd be curious to get your thoughts. Do you think they really pulled it off to the degree that they wanted to? So, it seems tangentially that they wanted 8 vaccines for every human being. People just simply aren't buying it anymore. They were pushing all the way, and it seems like they are still very much in retreat. I mean, they're still doing bad things with respect to COVID, so I'm not going to pretend like we won. But what are your thoughts on that specifically? Do you think that was just more of a matter of them just trying to see what they could get away with and conditioning us for the next big event? Or do you think that was them legitimately failing in terms of fully implementing the passport and all of that?
Well, both. So that they're always conditioning for future events, okay? Until we're completely docile and completely under their control. Um, and that would be something like a child raised in their system, which is extremely ugly. And secondly, did they fail? Well, that's a very difficult question to answer because there are a lot of delay mechanisms in what they did. And so if you look at the most honest and unflinching medical science related to the pandemic and the medicinal remedy for the pandemic, most of the intelligent voices in that circle are saying that the brunt of the consequence is going to begin to show itself 3 years
Mm-hmm.
after the vaccine started. Okay. So as these proteins build up in your body, that's where you get another level of health decay. So
Mm-hmm.
there was a group of people who went right away. Either the day of getting the shot or the day after or very shortly after, they would have a blood clot and have a massive stroke and die, or
Yep.
massive heart attack and die in their sleep, fairly young. And that was a very small percentage of the people who got vaccinated. Alarming, because I think everybody knew somebody by 6 degrees of separation who got taken out by the vaccine. But that was not the real dark side of the vaccine. The real dark side of the vaccine kicks in after 3 years, and it started now. There was I think the head of the statistics department, the government statistics department in New Zealand, did a BitChute video just last week with a member of parliament, a federal member of parliament, and they couldn't believe what they were seeing in terms of the spike in the death rates in New Zealand. And like 4 or 5 days after putting that video out, the head statistician, his home in New Zealand was swatted.
Yeah.
He got hit by a SWAT team, arrested. Did you see that?
Yeah, it wasn't just him. Like, you have dozens of scientists dead, five of the African leaders who were resisting it dead. Yeah, the was it Luc Montagnier, the virologist, the day before giving his deposition, just gone. So yeah,
Yeah. So I mean, and what is most alarming about this, okay? It's not the people who are doing it. We know that they're going to do what they're going to do. That's the role that they've been cast to play in this lifetime. They're going to be dark, and we have to fight them. We're going to be light, okay? So, what is truly alarming is all the people who are not waking up. The
yeah,
people, like, I find myself more frustrated with them now than I am with the people. You with me here? Like I I fully come to understand the term youth leader. You know, but it's like, come on, man, we're all in this together. We need numbers to make governments back down on things. They're killing us. They're attacking. Stand with us, and they're like, oh, F you, and it's very frustrating, very demoralizing the other human beings, especially, and I'm especially ashamed to say this, but at the top of this list are Canadians.
yep,
We could give the world a master class in apathy and self-indulgence.
agreed.
You know, it's just disgusting, except for your province, Alberta. That's the only one with a backbone now, you know. But I don't know if you know this. Well, you do. You read my biography, but I was born and raised in the nation's capital in Ottawa. And I mean that is like the ninth circle of hell, that city.
Yep,
But I mean, superficially, when you visit it, you go, "Oh, what a pretty city." But the energy underneath it is just so foul.
I
It's
agree.
and all capital cities are like that, you know.
I wish you were there for the
So
honkening, though, my brother. It was pretty good
yeah,
energy, I have to say. It was
were
like
you,
the
were you there?
Yeah, it was like the Canada Day we always wanted and never had our entire lives.
Oh wow. Yeah, I was very proud of those people, and what they've done to the leaders and some of the people. I mean, Trudeau's response to that, to freeze. I mean, if you gave $10 to them, you had your bank account frozen. I mean, that's like just dictatorial stuff. We haven't seen stuff like that since the Soviet Union and the gulags,
It was
you
incredible.
know?
Yeah,
Yeah, and what does it say about a country that still keeps that guy in power? I don't care how he does it with Jagmeet Singh and the NDP. I mean, Singh should not be making deals with that guy. He runs around wearing the turban. I've been to the Golden Temple. I've been to Sikh country in Punjab, and I'm telling you, they'd kill that guy. You show up there, kids would kick the living shit. There's no gay expression in Sikh culture. You can't be a Canadian Sikh. You can't be the leader of the NDP and pretend you're still Sikh. You're not Sikh anymore.
yeah.
And this is Canada, the land of pretend, right?
Oh
Uh,
yeah,
and Mr. Dress Up himself, the failed part-time drama teacher Justin Trudeau, is the ultimate epitome of that. He's literally Mr. Dress Up. If he's visiting natives, who knows what he's going to put on? Maybe leather deerskin pants. You know,
I know.
he's
It's
he's just an idiot.
Yeah. I mean, having said that, I'm actually very optimistic. So like you touched on the free men on the land earlier, and I agree. These guys are like I used to be in that movement when I was like 15. I knew a lot of the main
Yeah,
guys in Canada and America. I was like meeting at private compounds with these guys, and all of them ended up in
yeah,
jail or just were found out to be frauds. But I think a lot
yeah,
of their principles hold true. Maybe the system doesn't acknowledge it, but the concept that we are inherently sovereign and that we inherently need to contract. But moreover, I've come to the conclusion that Canada is not a country for us. Canada is a crown corporation set up for the betterment of a foreign, crown. And I do think in this. Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm good.
Oh,
I didn't
okay.
say anything.
Okay. Um, and so I I see the apathy as ultimately a good thing, not in the short term, but I think people's view of Canada and the systems and institutions are at such a low from COVID, right? Like every single institution here is guilty. They all pushed the mandates. They all forced people to wear the
Yeah.
masks. Every hospital stopped people from getting surgeries for being unvaxxed. Every university did it. Every single damn institution did it. And so when people finally wake up, like that's why I want the waking up to be a little slower and more gradual, because we're not just talking about a scandal of Chinese interference with one political party. We're talking about the entire system of Canada crumbling once people actually just know the truth of what's happened to us. And so, in the spiritual world, we talk about, you can learn on your own or learn from pain. And I think Canadians have chosen the path of pain. But I think in that we could very well build something new. Maybe Phoenix rising from the ashes. I hope not. But yeah, Bruce, your thoughts on that?
Well, um, in the days of more moral character, um, in the allegory of the devil buying your soul, there would have to be some grand prize given, like the musical ability given to Robert Johnson, the blues musician at the crossroads, the devil at the crossroads. What was given to Faust in Goethe's epic German poem. I would say now the contract with the devil and selling your soul is just a decent middle class income and a guaranteed pension, because these civil servants seem pretty soulless to me.
Yep.
And it's really, at the end of the day, their self-interest, right?
Yep.
I mean, nobody who thought the world would be this easy to control. Okay. Now, so it's happened in stages. Number one, get people off of land, get them off the family farms, and get them into cities.
Yep.
Number two, get them used to lunar bills. Okay. So if you notice, the bill structure is lunar. It's monthly, right? So
Mm-hmm.
this is what they always mix the unnatural and the natural together, so it's harder to pick up. So your bills are monthly, just like a moon. So it sort of fits into a rhythm in your mind. Oh, this is natural. It's natural to pay an electrical bill monthly. It's natural to pay a water bill, and so on and so forth. Um, so get people off land, get them accustomed to paying bills, get them dependent on money, get them into a fiduciary system where they, as living beings, don't own anything. Their legal person owns everything, and that legal person has no real God-given rights in the legal framework you exist. Those are the four cornerstones of the system of control. And it's worked out perfectly. Nobody will say anything. How do you stand up to this if you're let's say you're a doctor and okay, and you're giving the vaxes to people, and this is dangerous. You're not stupid. You've watched a few YouTube videos or BitChute videos, and you've read some papers in the scientific journals that are not as popular, and you go, wow, this mRNA ribonucleic acid vaccine technology should never have been released to the public now. And COVID was not a sufficient emergency to warrant the utility of experimental vaccine technology, which takes medicine to the lowest level ever, right? It used to be that medicine operated at the cellular level. Now it's operating even lower than the cellular level, at the level of deoxyribonucleic acid and ribonucleic acid through the
Yep.
mRNA vaccines. So you figure it all out. Let's say you're 42 years old, your wife is 42, you're both professionals,
You don't have your mortgage paid off. You have two cars you have to make monthly payments for. Your kids are in private school. That's a monthly payment. The kids are in sporting events, hockey, soccer in the summers. That's a monthly bill. You've got your life insurance. You've got on top of your mortgage, your home insurance. You've got your car insurance. How do you stand up? How do you stand up and say no more? Okay. It was almost easier to do when it was physical combat and people would pick up a shield and a sword and say, well, I'm not going to tolerate this anymore. And because you either A, win and you gain your whatever cause you were fighting for, you gain, or B, you lose and you're dead and you don't have to worry about it anymore. But in the modern system, if you stand up and they say, okay, you're done, you're fired. You went against your labor contract. You broke your non-disclosure agreement. You're gone. And I don't know if you read the last 8 pages of that very dense non-disclosure agreement, but we don't owe you, you lose your pension, even what you've put into your pension, everything. And we don't owe you severance pay. We don't owe you anything. Please clean out your desk and be gone by the end of the day. And you go home and you tell your wife and you say, and you tell your kids and you say, look, I stood up for all of us. The vaccine is bad. you know, what is your wife going to do? You think she's going to stay with you or get divorced? I mean, the system they've created is so diabolical, okay? So why am I so free to speak about these things? Well, if you've done a little bit of research on me, you know how I live. I figured it out. I went back to the land. I built an earth bag home in the rainforest. I grow a lot of my own food. I keep chickens. I have my own chicken coop for eggs. I'm a vegetarian.
He cut out again, guys. Let's wait for Bruce here. Guys, any questions for Bruce? See, Mustard Tiger had one. Wow, we lost him. Crazy.
The person you are trying to reach is currently.
Okay, guys, we'll give him another minute. See what's going on. Just totally dropped off. Guys, this is the downside of off-grid living. So, as I hope many of you know, or maybe you don't, I live off-grid as well here in Alberta, and it's not without its downsides. I actually made an episode recently entitled Why I Left the City, and you guys should check it out because it's not all great. But we got Bruce here. Let's see how he's doing.
Yeah, that was a micro power outage which shuts down the modem. It's like a full spectrum assault tonight. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Did you lose the stream?
No, we're still up. I was just talking. We've lost a few viewers, but we got a solid 10 left, which is all good. I get a lot of views after, or a lot more of my views afterwards. It's fine. But
Okay.
yeah, I was just saying the off-grid living is it's not without its downsides, right? We barely have any internet here. barely hanging on. And yeah, so some people romanticize it, which for me, I wouldn't want to live any other way, but people need to bear in mind things like this happen a lot more frequently.
Yeah. Yeah, but I am getting high speed internet tomorrow. My Starlink satellite is coming in tomorrow. And with a simple battery backup system, I'll never go down again. But the first 5 years have been very difficult. Now I can go weeks without any internet problems. I interview engineers for a living. I continue to work as a technical writer. I can hold a Zoom meeting in the middle of the day for 2 hours and not have a single glitch, and this can go on for weeks. When I go to do interviews on these books, it's a completely different story. Then every little weakness inherent in this environment and the communication I need to make from this particular location, it's like they all get amplified. Okay, and I'm not being superstitious. I'm not being self-aggrandizing. This is an observable phenomenon. Okay, and I think they've got AI algorithms built right into the network now. It's not like anybody is sitting in a basement at an intelligence agency listening to this conversation, but they do have technology that can sweep and wants to is looking to listen for certain things, and if they hear those things, then they start to create problems.
I know I haven't experienced it like just with you. I had a full page of notes on my phone. I was watching a video and my entire phone just died, man. It was incredible. And then, yeah, with our calendar thing today, I showed you on my end that it was in 2 hours, and then it showed up with you. It's like, hey, why aren't you on the stream with me? Crazy stuff. And maybe and I know with respect to Stardust Ranch, you talked about a lot of incidents happening with you while you're working on that book. Could
Yeah.
you maybe get into that a little bit more?
Yes. So Stardust and John Edmonds in particular were very interesting things to write about. But it came with a lot of activity and a lot of attention from let's call it the unseen realm, the fourth dimension. So when I say these things are coming from the fourth dimension, okay, so we need to understand the fourth dimension because the standard religious mind will see physical human beings, angels and demons, and then God. And that is the entire cosmology. Now, if they go deeper into it, they either go into the Kabbalah or the deeper teachings of the Jewish faith if they're Protestant, or the deeper teachings of the Catholic faith if they're Catholic. There are strata of angels and strata, different levels of demon and different levels of angel. You have the seraphim, you have the cherubim, and all of these sorts of things. But for the religious person, that is the entirety of cosmology. So when you say to them extraterrestrial, they say, well, that's got to be a demon because the Bible doesn't talk about extraterrestrials. Well, here's the truth. So when something greets you on the fourth dimension, it's a fourth dimensional entity, okay? Now, an angel can be on the fourth dimension. An angel can manifest physically or manifest phenomenon physically. So can a demon. But a lot of these extraterrestrials, they're not physical. They're in astral form. They're in fourth dimensional form. But we call them extraterrestrials because they were physically born and they do physically exist or did physically exist on another planet. Even though they're not physically manifesting in the Earth space, they're astrally manifesting in the Earth space. So technically, you can still call them extraterrestrials because they're living organisms, sentient bipedal hominids that were born on another planet in this galaxy or another galaxy, and they're able to find their way in the fourth dimension to the planet Earth. And we have human beings who can remote view and go to vast parts of the galaxy or the universe in their astral bodies. Why would we think other beings couldn't do it? Okay, if we can do it, why wouldn't other beings be able to do it? So when you get beyond the limitation of the religious rhetoric, you realize that you're dealing with a scope of life, an expression of life that is much, much wider than anybody can imagine. Like literally thousands of different of kinds of beings out there. Now, Stardust Ranch had two portals on it, and one of the portals had the ability to also take you to different times. Generally, a portal will take you from one place to another. And this, by the way, is how a lot of the extraterrestrials move around. They use portals. And most portals are just location centric. One of the portals on Stardust Ranch is also has a time dimension to it. So you could go through this portal in 2023, and when you come out the other end, you could be 10,000 years in the past or 10,000 years in the future. It's like the Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure portal. And things were coming through Stardust Ranch that were just otherworldly, you know. And when I started to work with John, a lot of the phenomenon bled over here. So I was having small micro portals open up in my home. And generally those will be about the size of a basketball, and you won't even know they're there unless you walk through them. And you'll know they're there by a smell. And the smell is usually something like a combination of copper, blood, rubbing alcohol, vegetative tissue, like plant tissue. That's the sort of general smell, like hospital or school cleaning products mixed with blood. Very, very, very weird and distinct smell, and nothing you could create at home, cooking or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't, you know how smells waft, right? So if your neighbor 100 meters away is having a barbecue, you smell the barbecue, you go outside your house, and this is how animals hunt, they follow the smell. And okay, because smell, there are molecules associated with the olfactory sense, and they move on the wind. When these portals open up and you get the smell doesn't waft. It's just in the one place. And the first time you experience it, it is so freaky. You pass through it and you go, what the hell was that? And then you start to smell and you go, where's that smell coming from? And you do what anybody else does with the olfactory sense, is you try to locate the smell, and then you realize there's no waft. This smell isn't coming in from anywhere. And then you turn around and you walk through the portal again and you go, it's right here. This is where the smell is. And it's only here. And then it gets really weird. So when the portals would open up, once the portal was open up, anything could happen in the house. So like a piece of furniture could move. It became physical at that point. Not a lot. This only happened where something in the house moved. This only happened a couple of times, but they were all very, very well witnessed, right? And I'll tell you a funny story. So at the time when this happened in 2019, my son was 22, and he was visiting while I was working on Stardust Ranch, and the portal was opening up. And being a normal 22-year-old Canadian, he smokes a little bit of marijuana. And my wife came in. My wife's a very clean living Christian lady, and she came in the house and walked right through the portal and snapped on my son. I don't want you smoking marijuana in the house. And here I am trying to explain to my Costa Rican wife, who was born on this mountain, that look, there's a portal opening up in the house. And I look at my son, I say, how are we going to explain this? He goes, just don't even try. Just put it on me. Say it was weed. Don't even try to explain the portal. But it was funny because she didn't know what to make of the smell. And she had told my son, I recognize you're a young man, and in Canada, marijuana is legal. But please don't smoke marijuana in the house. So when she walked through the portal, she thought he broke her rule, and just got a little bit. It was very funny. And then I had a ball of white light that sat in the house one Saturday morning. My wife took a picture of it, and this was probably the most pronounced paranormal event. And it hung up at the ceiling for about 10 minutes. That picture was subsequently studied at Harvard in the medical school. And they did a bunch of analysis on it, and they sent it back to me in a grid of four quads. And they said, what we can tell you is what it isn't. It isn't fluorescent light, it isn't incandescent light, and it isn't firelight. And I said, well, what other kinds of light are there? And they said, none.
I said, so what are you telling me? This is an otherworldly light? No, we're not saying that. I said, well, you told me everything it isn't, and you told me there's no other kind of light. And but that's what academics do. They almost get almost lawyerly with their language.
Yeah.
But they were quite fascinated. And then there's the dream space when you're working on one of these books. I mean, the dream space is just mind-boggling. What can come to you in the dream space is just unbelievable. You're going to get alien visitations, you're going to get all kinds of stuff. And you wake up and you go, geez, that was a weird dream. And you sit down at the desk and you start working on the book and you're there for a couple hours and then a little light goes on in your head. Hey, that wasn't a dream. And then, and then it just starts to accumulate and accumulate and accumulate for the months it takes to work on and finish the book. And then I'm generally glad to let go of these books because at that point I've had about all of the phenomenon that I want to experience. I just don't want any more. So that's a highlight of the things that happened on Stardust Ranch. Also, when I started the book, I had a very weird dream. Um, it was like a protection dream, and it was like John Edmonds himself was able to communicate to me directly in the dream space and say, "Look, this is going to be a harrowing experience, but don't worry, I'm going to be with you the whole time." And
Wow.
boy, he wasn't kidding. It was a harrowing experience to write that book. And then Light of Darkness just doubled down on it. That was a truly harrowing experience. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you experienced that yourself being with John at Stardust?
No, I have never been to Stardust physically. I've been there in dreams, but I've never gone and I never will go.
Yeah, it
Never will go.
sounds
So
sounds
all the
pretty
portals,
intense to put it mildly.
yeah, yeah, it is very intense, yeah. And so all of the portals and everything opened up here at my home in the mountains of the rainforest in southern Costa Rica. So when people say, did you go to the ranch and visit?" I said, "No, no, the ranch came to me."
Wow. Yeah, yeah, I was very sad to hear of John's passing, and
Me too.
yeah, that's tragedy. And I'm sorry for your loss. He seemed like a really great man. Just the work he did with horses, and then also a lot of his message and how he turned what was, you know, a very bad situation into something that really motivated people. And for me, I see it as very much part of the true disclosure. Um, and I'd love to get your thoughts on that specifically. Where do you think we are in alien disclosure itself? You see a lot of these guys like Greer and stuff that I don't trust at all, just being totally honest. But
Yeah.
we also see, yeah, not just the Stardust Ranch, but a lot of what I would call real people coming out and starting to disclose. So I'd be curious your thoughts on disclosure specifically in terms of where we're at.
I I have a few difficulties with Stephen Greer as well. He's got a very compelling narrative. He'll tell you that people on his team have been killed. There have been attempts made on his life. Very often in intelligence circles, they'll stage all of that stuff for public effect, right? I don't know what it is. I can't be rational about it. It's more of a gut feeling, but I literally do not trust Stephen Greer at all.
Yeah.
Um, there's another guy on the scene now, David Grush. And it's interesting because they're talking about a lot of the things that we talked about in Stardust Ranch. And when we wrote that book at the end of 2019 and published it December 31st, 2019, nobody was talking about UFOs in the context that John and I talked about them in Stardust Ranch. Now everybody is talking that way.
Yes.
They're saying it's a consciousness phenomenon as much as it is a physical phenomenon and stuff like that. And Stephen Greer, he changed direction within 4 months of that book coming out. He started Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, and I mean, he makes his living at this, right? He gets funded. He's got a big foundation that gets millions of dollars, and so he makes his living at this. And I do all of these books for me are part of what I call my spiritual service.
Yeah.
I do them on. I don't expect to live on them, and where I'm at as a technical writer now, for every hour I spend on one of these books, it's about 3 cents to the dollar what I would make just straight up technical writing or grant writing for technology companies,
Yeah.
right? So when I make anywhere from 50 to $180 an hour, depending on the contract I'm working on. It takes me 6 months full time to write one of these books. I think Stardust Ranch has done the best. It's maybe sold, I think, 3,500 copies. Light of Darkness has sold under 2,000 copies. But I'll tell you, the people who read that book just go apeshit. They will spend months trying to find me. And they're always the most interesting people, like unbelievably interesting, the people who find me related to that book.
Yeah.
And this third book will be the same. But I do them because I feel compelled to do them, to try to explain what's going on to people in this world. And there is an overlap between the spiritual and the extraterrestrial. Okay? The overlap is that it's happening in a dimension that's not entirely physical. And even though they don't clearly express the planes of existence in the Bible, when you get into the deeper esoteric material, for a Christian, it might be the Gnostic material. For a Jew, it would be the Kabbalah or deeper mystical study in Judaism. Um, in Islam, it's Sufism. They explain all of this stuff. Yeah, there's this astral plane. It's all there. And the most frustrating thing I find going on in 2023 is the incredible rise of fundamentalist Christians and just banging their Bibles and calling everybody out. It's demonology. And the level of spiritual ignorance is mind-boggling, mind-boggling. And you got to wonder at the end of the day in whose grip they are.
Hmm.
Okay? Because very, very often these demonic forces, they love inversion. They love to flip things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So very often the demonic energy can be coming at you superficially. The person it's coming through thinks they're acting on God's behalf.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? This inversion, like flipping things 180 degrees, is a big part of the relationship between the astral and the physical world. A lot of times to understand things, you have to flip them 180 degrees, right? It's almost like looking through a backwards mirror.
Yeah. Yeah. Up is down, above and below. Yeah, I mean, I understand the fundamentalism. Like, so I was previously in a Christian cult, and for me, it was seeing how insane the world has become and seeing the debauchery. Like, I lost 5 friends to drug overdoses even when I was young. And
Wow.
yeah, and I've had just over COVID, like 3 very close people take their own lives, and
Wow.
when you see just the evil in the
You're
world,
are
and
you a Gen are you a Gen Z?
I think so, 30, 33. What
So
does that
that would
make me?
be yeah,
Millennial. I'm a millennial.
yeah, you're a millennial. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. Boy, that's a lot of death. Like 5 overdoses and 3 suicides. That's
Yeah.
incredible,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
And the tragic thing during COVID was there was never any closure. We couldn't go mourn them physically, and people were hush hush about it. Whenever somebody takes their own life,
Yeah.
they don't really discuss it. Yeah, and so a point being is you see these tragedies and the blatant evil, and to somebody who doesn't really go down a lot of these spiritual paths, it's very easy to just say this is demonic, and it feels
Yeah.
like it to me, So I think people are just kind of doubling down.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of it is demonic. But it's not all demonic, and the extraterrestrials are not demonic. Some of it is, sure, but it's not all demonic, and that's a misrepresentation. And if you don't know what's going on, I'd be very careful about speaking in public pretending you know something and you don't know it. I think there's really wicked karma involved in that.
Interesting.
And yeah, yeah. So I tell what I know. If I'm asked a question, I don't know the answer. I'll tell you the degree to what I do know, and then I'll say the rest is a mystery to me. I'm trying to figure it out. And there are a lot of mysteries out there. I think that they're going to get resolved, like in this century. I think a lot of mysteries are going to get resolved in this century. I think we're scheduled for a huge upgrade, this human race. And when I say the human race, I mean the people who survive, because clearly we're in the midst of massive democide now, which is death by government. And it's taking many forms now. And another thing that I find really alarming in Canada is the easy facility of euthanasia.
Oh,
And apparently by March of 2024, the legislation will go into effect. You don't even need to be. You don't even have to have a life-threatening disease. If you just say you want to die, it'll be legal to commit suicide, and then they'll help you.
yep,
I find that extremely alarming.
I agree. It's evil. Yeah, but where do you think the error is from Christians labeling that demonic?
Not understanding what demons really are, okay, and blaming everything on demons, and not understanding what a demon is, okay. As I said at the beginning of the show, so I have another book coming out this week called The Devil in Us, a memoir of you and me.
Yep.
It's about growing. It's about part of the book is about growing up in Ottawa, growing up in a family that was very, let's say, well connected into the political infrastructure there,
Yeah.
and then the main body of the book is about what's wrong with the world. And the way Light of Darkness focused on the 375 years since the Bank of England, this book focuses on the 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell my own family story, and my father was an economist with what used to be called the Ministry of External Affairs, and he worked on free trade. And, I was getting a journalism degree at Ryerson, and we used to have these huge fights when I was home for vacation. And, he would defend free trade. And
Yeah.
I would say, you're just defending your pension. You're just defending your pension. You're a fucking hypocrite, you know? And he was, and he admitted it to me, 2 years ago on his deathbed. He said, "Yeah, you were basically right about free trade. I didn't see it at the time." Of course, he saw it.
Yeah.
Okay, I
Yeah.
mean, every question asked about free trade, which passed probably before you were born, it passed in 88, 89, right when the Cold War ended. But the logical question was, well, if we ship manufacturing to other countries, what's going to happen to those jobs? And are we going to have sufficient consumers to buy goods? You see, an economy has to be circular, like a
Yep.
pond.
Yep.
Okay, an ecosystem and an economy are very similar things. That's another thing that we allowed them to do, to take away our control, is we allowed them to separate our economy and part it off into different parts of the world.
Yeah.
And that gave them as government more control, right? So all these things they did. Anyways, getting back to the book, The Devil in Us, it's about, I come from a cursed family. I come from a family that was, very, very cursed. Masonic grandfathers and all of these sorts of things. And my job in this life in many ways was to break the curse. And I've done that, but doing it was quite a job. So you got to understand what a demon is, okay? And demons are first of all, the mythos of the Bible is a lie. There is nothing in rebellion to God, okay? They're working for God, okay? There is no enmity between God and the devil. They're like the left and right hand of the same body. And this is what people, please do not confuse what I'm saying with worship the devil. Don't worship the devil, okay? That's not a good idea to worship the devil. But look, if these dark forces come into your life, okay, here's the perfect way of explaining it, okay? The very worst fate you can have in life is to go through your whole life, never be motivated or prompted to think about a multidimensional reality, God, divine love, or any of these things, okay? So those people who go through life like that, those are the most cursed people. If demons and demonic energy comes into your life in such a way that it's phenomenological and it cannot be denied, and before that energy came into your life, you never thought about God, or a higher reality to life, you need to acknowledge you've just been blessed by a demon. Because if that never came into your life, you would have died a one-dimensional idiot who thinks that consciousness is the product of biology and there's no life after death.
Mm.
That demon did you a favor. That's what I mean when I say demons are part of the divine order.
Mm.
You
Yeah, it's
understand?
yeah, oh for sure, and I see that as well. Like I'm not super open about it, but I've had a very difficult upbringing. Had a lot of things happen to me, and well, I don't advocate for intentional traumatizing, but going through that and overcoming, especially at a young age, and also healing trauma, which is something that's really come to surface for me in the past few years as the biggest hurdle to spiritual growth. I feel that I can appreciate life so much more richly, and I have like a lot deeper understanding of the world and my relationship to it. And for me, I live such a blessed life now. Like I feel that God is
Yeah.
very much in my life, and that I feel very connected to God. Like, and that's something I struggled with in Christian circles is from the time I was 10, I felt my chakras, and nobody ever taught me what chakras were. And one time I actually had to go to the hospital because my like ground chakra was lighting so much they thought something was like ruptured. Then later I talked
Wow.
to a native elder and they're like, "Yeah, that's just your like chakras." I'm like, "Oh." So like I had all these experiences that the traditional religions just didn't really explain. And so yeah, I totally agree with you that cuz something in my gut or intuition tells me that if there is God in, let's say, like a court, right? A court of God,
Yeah.
that the quote evil controllers will, they're not violating any laws. As evil as we see their manifestations, as much as when we come across them, yes, we should resist evil at all costs and choose goodness. Something tells me that they're following the law to the letter, and I do see
Yeah.
that dynamic where you know they are working for us. Like you know, sometimes I think about that too. Like in the truther movement, um, they the they show us the Klaus Schwabs and the WF, like this is your future and there's nothing you can do about it. Like maybe the actual people running it are just like super based spiritual guys who are like, man, we got to wake these humans up. They're bestial savages, and so we got to put them through a bunch of
Yeah.
awful stuff so they stop killing each other and you know start loving each other and following the teachings of Christ. Like, and I think about
Yeah.
that too. Like, if people literally just loved your neighbor as yourself and put love God with all your heart and treated others like yourself, I mean, it's game over, right? But
Well,
it's very easy to do.
absolutely. But, this weekend or tonight, if you have time, actually sit down and reread very slowly, sound the words out in your head. Very slowly read the gospel according to Matthew in its entirety. It doesn't take that long. And then when you're done, I want you to ask yourself one simple question. Have you ever met a true Christian based on the gospel according to Matthew? It's almost an impossible life to live. It's easier. My path is easier. 2 to 4 hours of meditation a day, vegetarianism. The Christian path is it's 24/7. I mean, it seems so simple. Like when more complicated metaphysical paths look at Christianity, they go, wow, that's an incredibly bare bones spiritual path. You believe this and you go about your life and you're supposed to live the way Christ did. But when you actually sit down and you read the gospel according to Matthew, which is the best account of how Christ did live
Mm.
and what he said you should do in our lives, you realize that's incredibly difficult. Okay. It's like literally you put everybody before yourself. Okay. First God, your neighbor, everybody before yourself. I can honestly say at 57 years old, I don't think I've ever met a true Christian.
and least of all, the people who go into the clergy.
Oh yeah.
Okay, because to be a true Christian, you would have to, be working in the world, because when Christ came, there was no such thing as a Christian profession. I mean, there was no ministers, there were no priests, there were no nothing.
Yeah.
So a Christian would have been like a farmer.
Yeah.
Now, it would have been easy. It would have been easier to be a Christian 1900 years ago. And Christianity in the Laodicean church, the first church in the first century AD, it was very interesting to follow the teachings of Christ from his death onwards, up until it got really, really corrupted in the Council of Nicaea in 535 AD
Hmm.
in Byzantium, which is what we call Istanbul today. But it was an incredibly austere path. I mean, like, Christians were just like incredibly austere. It's a very difficult life to live, to put love first in this material reality. Again, the mortgage, the car payments, the car insurance, the house insurance, the school payments, the monthly bills. It's very difficult to be a Christian in the world we've structured. Very, very difficult.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I agree. It's well, we all fall short of the glory of God, and out
Yeah.
here, on several of my solo podcasts, I've mentioned that I just see such goodness in the Christian communities, right? Out here, there's a split of there's a lot of people with substance abuse problems and a lot of abuse and low incomes and you know traumatic generational trauma, if you will. But then, all of our friends are Christians who are having families, you know, helping their communities, super loving, super giving. And so, for the people who discount Christianity, I say, look, you shall know them by the fruits of their labor. And I've debated, well, my first live stream actually was with a guy named Adam Green, who he can speak about a lot of the Zionist and Talmudic issues better than I
Is
ever
that
could.
the No More News guy?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and so on that topic he's fantastic, but you know he actually argues, um, others do as well, that Christianity is just another like Jewish plot, basically, that they created Christianity as a farce to um, get Gentiles under Noahide and to basically bring down Rome during the day in a political revolution. And he won't he can't fully see the benefits of Christianity because he's viewing it from that lens. But yeah, I'd be curious to get your thoughts on that specifically. Like, do you think Christ actually existed? Where do you see the value of Christianity? Because
Oh,
it sounds like you do. So
yeah, 100% he existed. And um, the books that have been put out contradicting that are just complete nonsense. Like, I forget the guy's name, but the book is called Caesar's Messiah. And of course, Christ. Look, it would be almost impossible to fake the existence of Christ based on the historical record in the first century, second century, third century, fourth century. What are all these people doing, and who are they following if there was no Christ? Okay, there absolutely was a Christ. He absolutely did say those things. They absolutely were recorded. Whether he was crucified on a cross, I don't know. I mean, that it gets more mysterious at that point. Okay, he shed blood, and that might have been the totality of his mission for the blood covenant, was to shed blood. Um, but yeah, 100% he existed, and I think it would benefit a person tremendously to live the Gospels. But that's it. Like, when people say to me, "What do you think of Christianity, Bruce?" I say, don't join any organizations and live exactly what the Gospels say, and don't read any other parts of the Bible. Don't get into the legalese. You don't need to read Isaiah to prove that Christ existed and that he was the Messiah. And then you're basically just following the incredible love message of this man in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And that's all you need: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
But I do kind of agree with Adam Green and his old cohort there, Christopher Jan Birkin, where they start to talk about, how these ideologies get into your head
Mm-hmm.
and really become corrupt political movements. I don't think Israel would be able to get away with what it's getting away with now if it weren't for Christian Zionism in the United States.
Agreed.
And I
Totally agree.
and and I think that's really bad,
Yep.
right? And but they're actually living the Gospels. Wow. I mean, yeah, that's an incredibly spiritual life.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, and I know I've heard you've also spoke of the poems of Kabir, and I've started looking into that a bit. Uh, I know you had said that that was one of the most profound spiritual teachers you've found. Is that still the case
Kabir,
for you? And yeah, maybe
yeah,
you could
it has
talk to us
it,
about their
it has
philosophy.
it has been for 25 years. So Kabir was a mystic born up about right around the border between Pakistan and India today, up around Kashmir, Amritsar in northern Punjab. And nobody really knows. He's kind of mysterious because he didn't say the two religions at that time were Hinduism and Islam, and he didn't say he was either one. He didn't take either side, but he was an outrageous mystic. I mean, his poems, and I think I truly believe that Kabir is the first teacher in a new spiritual system that's going to come about in the age of Aquarius,
Mm.
because it's much more scientific, it's much more rational, it's much more logical. And although spirituality doesn't necessarily have to be rational or logical, what Kabir was advocating was a tangible relationship with internal energies, a tangible relationship. No, Kabir was saying, look, faith is only going to get you so far. God created us to know things, not believe things. And the way you come to know things is you go within yourself. You learn to meditate.
Mm.
Okay. And again, I mean, this is where I find myself at issue with Christians. I mean, you get hardcore Christians in the 21st century who say even meditating is a form of demonology.
Yeah, yeah, it's
You know,
satanic. I've
and
heard that.
I'm like, I mean, that level of ignorance is mind-boggling to me. So you're telling me that the totality of a spiritual life is simply saying, I believe Jesus, I'm saved, it's all over. You don't have to do any work. Bullshit. Absolute. I would say that's a satanic deception right there.
Yeah,
Remember how we were talking about the inversions,
yeah.
right?
I feel that too. Like for me, as I said, out here, all of our friends are Christians and they're really great people, but I cannot go into a church. It feels like a total looshing energy suck, and I think that's by design too. Like I don't know if it's just the fact that when humans gather, it becomes this looshing energy harvesting event and stuff. I recently put out a solo episode called on cults where I just talk about that. Like anytime you get two or more people, it becomes culty almost always because of humans, right? But yeah, I
Yeah.
think something about the organized part, it seems to be some type of energy harvesting system. And yeah, just on that topic, actually, you've said something else very profound to me. That you argued that each religion is actually created by a different alien race. And so I'd
Yeah.
love to get your thoughts on that.
So the modern Abrahamic system is a combination between Anunnaki, reptilian, and Palladian. And so this would, you could almost pick who's who through the entire prophetic lineage. Okay. If you read the Billy Meyer material, and he claims to be a Palladian contactee, he will tell you that Christ was the product of a mating between a Palladian Ishwish, which is a Palladian holy man, and a human female. And immediately you have to ask yourself, okay, are the archangels Palladians?
Mm-hmm.
John Edmonds told me that black magic was given to the world by the reptilians. I actually wrote that in Stardust Ranch, and I believe him. I followed that up with a bit more research. There was Tompkins' book, Selected by Extraterrestrials. he started to interview in his late 90s. Like when he was 94, he was interviewing for this book he published called Selected by Extraterrestrials. He also said that that most of the world leaders now were reptilian. So again, this is like their astral form. Their physical form is the same as ours, but their astral form is reptilian. Okay, so
Yep.
this is what people need to understand, because this is when people talk, it's multidimensional. Now, maybe David Icke didn't make that clear in the 90s when he brought out the reptilians. By the way, the reptilians are all through scripture.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are entire sutras by the Buddha where he describes the Naga, Naga, and the Naga are shape-shifting reptilians. This is nothing new. This is openly spoken about in mystic circles in India amongst Vedic mystics. Okay, most of them will have met reptilians at a certain point in their meditations. Okay, um, whether they're really running the world now, yeah, I think that there is a lot of reptilian energy behind the control of the world now. But I think that they used to live more peacefully with us, and maybe they've turned on us because we haven't been doing a really good job the last 100 years or so. I mean, we split the atom, we dropped atomic bombs, we've done a lot of things. If there was other sentient life on this planet, do you think it might not get a little upset about that? I think it would.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
yeah. Yeah, so everything is basically true, but a little more complicated than people think. It's not all just like cut and dry. Oh, reptilians run the world. Okay, why? Why now? If they've been here as if Buddha was talking about them 2,500 years ago, literally shape-shifting reptilians, and he said that they were endemic to the experience down here. They were literally everywhere. They were around you all the time. You wouldn't know them if they were in human form. Um, this is the Buddha, the founder of one of the world's major religions, okay?
Yeah.
And we didn't have any problems coexisting with them 2,500 years ago. The question then becomes, well, what changed? What changed?
Hmm.
We changed, basically. We changed. We're a completely different species now.
Yeah.
I think human beings have always been the most dangerous thing on this planet. We always like to tell ghost stories around the fire, Oh, demons are real, reptilians are real. I wonder what ghost stories the reptilians tell around their fire. Man, if these humans continue to breed and continue to get into these dark sciences, they're going to ruin this planet we live on. That's the reptilian horror story around the fire.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember funny anecdote. When I was a kid, I was always very into nature, and I noticed that squirrels and all the animals would constantly be running away from me when I was a kid. And I still remember thinking, like, why are they scared of me? I just want to love them and be their friends. And then you grow up and you learn what humanity's capable of. It's like,
Yeah,
well, maybe they know what's up.
yeah. Instinct and common sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So you said that, so the Masons and the, let's say, high level Zionists, if you will, and they're all kind of working. They're all kind of one big group that, with the illusion of
Yeah,
separateness. Do you believe the same with respect to, let's call them, dark ETs? That there is one
yeah,
overarching group running the whole
yeah.
show, or
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It goes by many names. You can call it the Orion Group. You can call it Ariel, the extraterrestrial that was interviewed from the Roswell crash in 1947, calls it the Old Empire. But it's commonly known in Earth ET lore in exopolitical circles as the Orion Group, and it's a combination of Anunnaki reptilian, dark reptilian, Draco reptilian, um, negative gray aliens, and a whole group of nasty players. And they have been sort of shut down in most of the universe, but they're still operating in where we are, which is the outskirts or the bad neighborhood of the Milky Way galaxy.
mm,
But I think it's all coming to an end. I really do. I think it's coming to an end, and probably in our lifetimes, in the next 30 years or so, it's going to come to a definitive end. I think it's in its death throes now. which is why we're seeing so much negativity now. So and this is another thing that I think Christians get wrong. They say, oh, well, the world is going completely evil now. Well, no, it's always been pretty dark at the management level, at the running things level. I mean, you just look at the way the English, treated the Scots and during the Scottish appeal for independence, with William Wallace and things like that. It's always been dark on this planet, okay?
Hmm.
It may seem a lot darker, and it seems so dark now because the darkness is being revealed. And that's one of the things that happens when the God energy, when the energy of divine love comes more into the collective consciousness. You wake up on a Monday and you go, geez, I never noticed this before. This is really dark. It's really always been there. What changed is your ability to perceive it. And so I think a lot of people are tuning into it now. And I think that the presence of divine love is increasing on the planet, not receding. I don't think negativity is winning. I think it's losing.
I
And
agree.
yeah, and so it's going to be going away. But because everything that comes into the spectrum of reality we live in is here to teach us, it's not going to go away without our knowledge, our conscious knowledge of it, because otherwise its teaching value would be lost. So it all has to come out, is what I'm saying. And it is coming out, and it is unbelievably ugly.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, this book I have coming out now, I mean, I spent considerable time with one of the top, if not the top, criminal profiler in the world for child predators. She's in her 60s. She lives in Belgium, and she's got multiple PhDs. She's worked with Scotland Yard, Quantico, the FBI, and she factors into this book quite a bit. I do a whole chapter on her called The Human Devil. I mean, when you get into this stuff, like, yeah, I mean, it's mind-boggling. The stuff that really gets me is what they do to children. I mean, it's just so. I mean, what kind of a monster do you have to be to do these things to children, right? Like, it's just mind-boggling,
I
just
know.
absolutely.
I know. I had an experience just yesterday. I was on Twitter. I was just looking up the new launch of Grand Theft Auto 6, and someone had posted just awful stuff that got through their filters. And man, I was messed up. I'm still kind of messed up from it. I don't want to go into details. And I reported it immediately, but just the sick stuff that people do to kids. And that's where I really resonate with Christianity. It's like, don't you harm a hair on their heads. It would be better that you tie a millstone than you mess with one of God's kids. Yeah, it's really dark stuff, and that's why it takes a lot of spiritual strength to see these realities in the world, but then to still choose light and not get totally sucked into it. Because I think that's part of the spell. When they do evil, it sucks you into anger, into lower states where you kind of
Yeah,
are closer in vibration, if you will.
yeah, yeah. They want to drag you into a reactive state. Okay, so by the way, in all forms of combat, wrestling, boxing, martial arts, you want to get your opponent to react because most martial arts capitalize on reactions. Okay, so it's the same thing and that's a metaphor for the totality of life, thought and feeling as well, not just physical action. So they're absolutely trying to engage us. Okay, absolutely trying to engage us and get us to react. And it's very difficult not to react, but you can't really react. I mean, beyond um, what the law permits and so on and so forth. But
Yeah.
it's just disgusting, man. Hey, man,
Yeah.
I gotta wind it up. This is like 2 hours and 12 minutes.
Yeah, yeah. That no problems at all. Yeah, I mean, really,
Have we
oh, go ahead.
have we been live this whole time, or do you record and edit and then publish?
Yeah, we've been running live this whole time. There's probably 5 minutes of absolute savagery on the stream where we're reconnecting and such. But yeah, we've been managed to keep up. The chat room's still going here as well. Um,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, really, my final question, and you pretty much already touched it, is where do you see things playing out in the next 5-10? Like, it sounds like you're quite optimistic, but maybe walk us through that. And
I think Overall, we get through this and we become a better species, but I think massive depopulation is inevitable. I think too many people have taken the bad medicine. I think, I mean, you've already given testimony in this interview. I mean, 5 overdoses and 3 suicides. That's 8 people you know personally. You're in your early 30s. I'm 57 and I have one friend who committed suicide, and even that's debatable whether it was suicide or whether or not he accidentally died mixing sleeping pills and whiskey.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a lot of people who go by the wayside, and the human race that persists and survives through this is going to be a much stronger human race, and then I think we're going to go into much better places, and we're going to rebase spiritually. I think we're going into a spiritual golden age. I really do. And this is the way the cycle works. You go from very negative to very positive right away. It's kind of like a light switch almost, and it's going to happen in this 21st century.
I feel it too. I just see the controllers, they're just pushing so fast, and they don't care that they're found out. Like, they are largely found out now. Like, everybody knows the
Yeah.
game. It just seems like this desperate, feeble attempt. It's like trapping a psychopath in a corner. Like, 10 cops are in the room, but he's still gonna, try to punch and stab as much as he can until he gets brought down. Like, do you feel the same when you see their actions? And yeah, it's kind of
I do. I
desperation.
mean, like, let's stick with somebody we know, Justin Trudeau. I mean, I'm amazed he can still show his face in public and pretend like he doesn't know what an idiot he is. Like, he's got to know. Everybody in the room knows he's a complete doofus, and yet he banks on the idea that the power is going to carry him through. And it does in most instances. His position, his title, and his power will get him through it. Nobody will openly confront him for the reasons we've already mentioned in this interview. Salary, pension, benefits, dental, all of those things. Um, but he's like one of the worst examples on the planet now
Yeah.
of how bad leadership can become.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, well, Bruce, despite multiple Orion attacks, we have made it through our first interview together. I want to thank you so much for jumping on the stream. Thanks for everyone, guys, who held on. Doc VJ, many thanks to you. She said, Bruce, it's all vibrations. Reactions is what they want, as well as in social media. And narcissists love bragging about what they are about to do. I totally agree. Bruce, thoughts on that?
Thank.
Quick.
Well, yeah, narcissists love to brag, and self and Satan are synonyms, actually, by the
Yeah.
way.
Mhm.
I thought maybe I should throw that in at the last minute. Having a very strong sense of self is a very strong satanic presence in your own life. So people need to remember that as well. Yes, everything is vibration. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but yeah, fundamentally everything is vibration. We raise our vibration by prayer, meditation, mantra, singing hymns, anything that puts us into a very pleasant state of mind.
Mm.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Gonna close the stream down. I'll say a quick goodbye on Skype. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Yeah, follow Bruce. His books are online on Amazon, and his new book coming out is should be available this week. So, yeah, Bruce,
Yeah.
thanks so much.
You're welcome, man. Thanks for having me.